I was a teenager when my parents had their nasty divorce. Then Brad walks into my mother's life and he dramatically changes things for the worst.
Hello, I'm Truly, and welcome to my channel. For more stories, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
The chipped ceramic mug warmed my hands, a small comfort against the persistent chill that seemed to cling to the corners of our house, or maybe just to me. Steam curled upwards, carrying the scent of hazelnut coffee, a scent I normally loved. But today, it did little to soothe the knot of anxiety in my stomach. I was 24 now, a far cry from the sullen, confused teenager I'd been when Brad first swaggered into our lives. Back then, everything had been splintered. The divorce, the constant arguments that preceded it, the way my dad, William, just seemed to fade. It had all left me raw and exposed. Then, Emma, my mom, started seeing Brad, and it felt like adding salt to an open wound. "Morning, Milton," Mom's voice cut through my thoughts. She entered the kitchen, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, a smudge of lipstick already gracing her lips. She looked happy, and that was the thing. That's what made this whole situation so unbelievably complicated. "Morning, Mom," I mumbled, taking a sip of my coffee. "Brad's making pancakes." "You want some?" she asked, already reaching for the spatula. The thought of Brad making me breakfast felt like a twisted joke. "No, thanks. I'm good." Her smile faltered, just for a second. "He's trying, Milton." "You should try too." Trying? Was that what we were calling it? Because for the past 7 years, all I'd witnessed from Brad was a masterclass in thinly veiled disdain. He wasn't openly aggressive, not really. It was more subtle, a drip, drip, drip of negativity that eroded my self-worth bit by bit. A constant reminder that in his eyes, I was still that troubled, rebellious kid. "Mom, we've been over this. He doesn't like me. He barely tolerates Philip either." Philip, my younger brother, had always been more adept at deflecting Brad's barbs, mostly by ignoring him completely. I envied him that. "Don't say that. It's not true." She busied herself with the pancake batter, avoiding my gaze. But it was true. It was as true as the sun rising in the east. Brad never missed an opportunity to subtly undermine me. A raised eyebrow when I talked about my job, a dismissive chuckle when I mentioned my photography hobby, a pointed remark about how I used to waste my potential back in high school. He held on to those teenage transgressions like they were precious jewels, forever brandishing them as proof of my inherent inadequacy. And what were these transgressions anyway? Skipping class when the anxiety became too much to bear? Experimenting with substances to numb the pain of a broken home? Writing angsty poetry in my journal? Teenager stuff? Hurt people, hurting people. I was a different person now. I had a good job as a graphic designer. I volunteered at a local animal shelter. I was in therapy, working through the years of accumulated baggage. But to Brad, I was still that kid, frozen in time, a permanent disappointment. Brad entered the kitchen then, his presence immediately filling the room. He was a big man, with a booming voice and a backslapping demeanor that always felt forced around me. "Morning, Emma." "Morning, Milton," he said, the last word laced with a subtle, almost imperceptible edge. "Morning, Brad," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. He flipped a pancake with a flourish. "So, Milton still playing with those cameras, huh? You ever going to turn that into a real job?" My jaw tightened. "It is a real job, Brad. I get paid for it." Sure, he said, waving his hand dismissively. "But you know what I mean. Something with a steady paycheck, benefits. I'm happy with what I'm doing," I said, trying to keep the anger from rising in my voice. "Happy is one thing," Brad retorted. "Success is another." Mom cleared her throat. "Brad, maybe we should talk about something else?" He shot her a look that I couldn't decipher, then turned back to me, a smug smile on his face. "Just trying to offer some friendly advice, Milton. Someone needs to look out for you." The audacity of that statement made my blood boil. He wasn't looking out for me. He was deliberately trying to make me feel small and insignificant. He always had. I pushed my chair back from the table. "I'm going to head out," I said, grabbing my jacket. "Thanks for the concern, Brad." I slammed the door behind me, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. Walking down the street, I fumed. Why did she put up with him? Why did she subject herself, and us, to his constant negativity? Was her happiness really worth our misery? The truth was, I understood why Mom was with Brad. After years of a passionless marriage, he represented excitement, attention, someone who made her feel desired. My dad was a kind man, a good man, but somewhere along the way, the spark between them had died. Brad was the opposite of Dad in every way. Charismatic, assertive, someone who took charge. And maybe, after years of feeling invisible, Mom craved that. But that didn't excuse the way he treated me and Philip. Later that evening, I found Mom sitting on the porch swing, staring out at the twilight. I hesitated, then sat down beside her. "Rough day?" she asked, her voice soft. "You know it was," I said, sighing. It's always a rough day when Brad decides to offer friendly advice. She was silent for a moment, then said, "He doesn't mean to be unkind, Milton. He just doesn't always know how to express himself. That's bullshit, Mom, and you know it. He's deliberately condescending. He enjoys making me feel like I'm still that screw-up teenager." "You weren't a screw-up, Milton," she said, her voice rising slightly. "You were going through a difficult time. We all were, and he uses that against me. Still, 7 years later, he sees your potential," she insisted. "He wants you to do well." "No, he doesn't. He wants to feel superior. He wants to remind me that he thinks he's better than me." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Please, Milton. I can't do this. I can't keep mediating between you two. It's tearing me apart." My anger deflated, replaced by a wave of guilt. I hated that I was putting her in this position. I knew she loved me, and I knew she loved Brad. And I was stuck in the middle, the constant source of conflict. "I know, Mom," I said, softening my voice. "I'm sorry. It's hard." "I know it is. But can you try? For me? Can you try to find some common ground with him? Just be civil?" I looked at her, her face etched with worry and exhaustion. How could I say no? "I'll try, Mom," I said, even though the words felt like lead in my mouth. "I'll try to be civil." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Civil. What did that even mean? Did it mean swallowing my pride and pretending that his words didn't sting? Did it mean ignoring the way he looked at me, like I was some kind of stain on his perfect world? I didn't know if I could do it, but I knew I had to try for Mom's sake. The next few weeks were an exercise in forced politeness. I greeted Brad with a strained smile, endured his condescending remarks with gritted teeth, and tried to avoid him as much as possible. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, but I managed to maintain a semblance of civility. Then came Mom's birthday. Brad had planned a lavish dinner party at an upscale restaurant, inviting all her friends and family. I dreaded it. I knew it would be an evening of forced smiles and awkward conversations. As the evening progressed, my anxiety grew. Brad was in his element, holding court, telling jokes, basking in the attention. I sat quietly at the table, picking at my food, trying to make myself invisible. Then, during a lull in the conversation, Brad raised his glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," he announced, his voice booming through the room. "To Emma, the most wonderful woman in the world. She's brought so much joy into my life, and I'm so grateful to have her." Everyone clapped and cheered. Mom beamed at Brad, her eyes shining with happiness. Then, Brad turned to me. "And I'd also like to say something about Milton," he said, his voice suddenly taking on a harder edge. "He's come a long way. He's not the easiest person to get along with, but I can tell he's trying." A ripple of unease spread through the table. I felt my face flush with anger. This was it. This was his idea of being civil, a backhanded compliment, delivered in front of everyone we knew. "He still has a lot to learn," Brad continued, oblivious to the tension in the air. "But I'm sure, with a little guidance, he'll eventually figure things out." I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "That's enough, Brad," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I'm done with this." All eyes turned to me. Mom looked horrified. "Milton, please," she whispered. "No, Mom, I said, my voice rising. I'm not going to sit here and listen to him belittle me anymore. I've tried to be civil, I've tried to be polite, but he can't help himself. He has to put me down. He has to make me feel small. I turned to Brad, my eyes blazing with anger. You know what, Brad? I don't need your guidance. I don't need your approval. I'm doing just fine without you. I looked at Mom, her face etched with pain. I'm sorry, Mom, I said, my voice softening. But I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend that everything is okay when it's not. And with that, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving behind the forced smiles, the awkward conversations, and the weight of Brad, a weight I had carried for far too long. Walking into the cool night air, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Maybe I had made things worse. Maybe I had hurt Mom. But I couldn't keep living a lie. I had to stand up for myself. I had to break free from the cycle of negativity. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be difficult conversations, hurt feelings, and maybe even a period of estrangement. But I knew, deep down, that I had done the right thing. I was no longer that troubled teenager. I was a grown man, and I deserved to be treated with respect. And if Brad couldn't offer me that, then I didn't need him in my life, no matter how much it hurt Mom. The real work I knew was in healing the wounds that Brad and the divorce had inflicted. It was about forgiving myself for the mistakes of the past, and building a future where I was valued, respected, and loved, not in spite of who I was, but because of it. And maybe, just maybe, Mom would eventually understand. Maybe she would see that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to walk away.